Welcome to the Healthcare Hot Seat with Tina D. Badham and Lori D. Owens, where the people who keep healthcare moving and the people who depend on it finally get a seat at the table. Take your seat. The conversation starts now. Welcome back to the Healthcare Hot Seat. I'm Tina Badham.
And I'm Lori Owens. If you're new here, this is where we talk about what healthcare really looks like, the real stories, the real challenges, and the real people holding it all together.
Every week, we bring someone into the hot seat to help us understand a part of the system that deserves more honesty, more clarity, and a little bit more humanity. Today's conversation is exactly that.
We're joined by Dr. Matt Henson, Executive Director of the Homecare and Hospice Associations of Utah and Colorado. He is also heavily involved in the Alliance programs for Oregon and Colorado as well. He's here to talk about two programs that speak directly to dignity, compassion, and community responsibility.
One is a hospice and corrections program, and the other is a set of free caregiver resources designed to support people caring for loved ones, the folks who are often overwhelmed, under-supported, and navigating systems that feel impossible. Matt, we want to welcome you to the Healthcare Hot Seat.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate the invitation.
Matt, before we dive into these programs, help our listeners to understand the world you're working in. What does the Alliance do, and what brought you to this kind of work?
So the associations were trade organizations for the states. Most states across the country have a trade organization for home care and or hospice. Sometimes they're the same association, sometimes they're different within a state. I'm a physical therapist by background, so I'm a clinician. I started my career in pediatrics. And owned up in Washington State, actually right after grad school, owned a staffing agency. And so not only do we have contracts with local school districts and with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, but also in home health. And so I love seeing people in their natural environment. I love seeing them at home, which later in my career, when we moved back to Utah, my wife and I led me to get involved with our association, first as a volunteer board member, then as president. And I was later asked by the board if I would help the association into the future through a merger with home health and hospice as the executive director.
Wow, that's fantastic. So I think, just kind of that it sounds like you've had a really hefty career, Matt. You've definitely done a little bit of everything, and I think that's fabulous. And I think, with our discussion today, I'd like to, if you're okay with that, start with the Hospice and Corrections Program. So this is something I think that most people never really think about from the grand scale of everything. I don't think people think about hospice being a part of a correction system. But of course, once you hear about it, you can't really unsee the need. I think since you and I and Lori had that discussion, it's like, wow, I do understand where there is a need for that. So can you walk us through what that program actually is and why it matters and kind of how you've come to be involved in that?
Absolutely. No, thank you. I was much like you. I had no idea that there was even a need. Not being in that world, it's not even something I really thought of until I saw someone speak, a man by the name of Stephen Gardner. And he gave an address at one of our conferences in Colorado. And that's a story in and of itself, how we even invited him, because I heard that there was this man who helped us set up a hospice program in Angola. And I was thinking Angola, Africa. And I'm like, well, it sounds interesting. I don't know how many of our members or attendees are going to be starting an international, right. hospice somewhere. And what I learned is that they were referencing or referring to Angola State Prison in Louisiana. Wow. And Stephen was actually someone who served time. He served 31 years as an inmate in that prison. Oh. And he said that as a young man in his early 20s, he had made some bad choices. And that, when he started his prison sentence, he was determined to change. But the first part of that sentence, he never had an opportunity to change. He said the culture was so completely different that it really didn't give people an opportunity for redemption. And then they started a hospice program and they asked for volunteers. And so they asked for volunteers from the incarcerated individuals, from those serving time. And Stephen was one of the first to volunteer. And he talked about how serving people and being with them during the sacred time of life changed his life. So my initial interest actually began with Stephen's involvement in seeing just how it changed him as a person, being with people during those times, reading with them, singing to them, holding their hand, when they're dying, writing stories or letters to their families. And, I was very interested in that. And then I got involved and asked to take a tour of our state correctional facility and see what was being done. And what I saw really motivated me to help, elicit change. And I'd be happy to talk to that as well. But that's really how things got started was with a man and a message.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That is truly amazing. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're seeing with the program and how that makes it possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to be too graphic or specific about what I saw, in Utah. There are great people there. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that impressed me the most was the staff. The correctional facility staff they were professional. They were kind. From what I saw with their exchanges and the many times that I've been back since, I've just been so impressed. Um, but they were also not fully aware of what the needs were. And when I went on my first tour and I asked what happens if someone's passing, right? If they're entering the active stage of dying, because people are there for whatever reason. I mean, at end of life, some people are serving full life sentences. Some people are serving later in life and it may be a shorter sentence, but they end up passing when they're in a correctional facility. So there are many different reasons that, somebody may be there at end of life in a correctional facility. But at the time, they didn't have any special facility at all. There was a room. And this room was kind of in a dark corner in the infirmary. And what I saw were 3 or 4 individuals that were in there alone. It was dark. I asked how often they had human contact. The medical director looked at me and kind of shook her head and she says, "What do you mean, every week?" I said, "Daily." "How often do they have contact?" And they said, "Well, an orderly will go by and check to see if they need a briefing change, a couple times a day." But there was nowhere there human contact. So they were listening to each other basically, die, and the moaning and the sounds that some of them were experiencing.
Oh, that's horrific.
And so just incredible, right? I mean, we talked about pain control at the time as well, and there was this concern, well, if we give them this or this or this, we're in a controlled environment, it's difficult, medications could get diverted. So, some of them, she said, were just being given Tylenol and ibuprofen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you can imagine. And it was just missing the complete hospice philosophy. So that started us on a journey of education and helping, teach. But it was a receptive audience. And so that's what we found as we've spoken to other states is that it varies. I mean, there are some states that are on top of this and are doing, a great job. There are other states where some facilities may have a hospice program and others don't have anything. And then there are still many other states, because it's probably only about 20% of the states are really doing a hospice program at all right now.
Wow.
And there are many more states that just do not have any type of end of life program at all.
And I think it brings up the bias, right, about end of care. Like, I think this is something that I definitely learned, like going through nursing school. Like every person deserves dignity in death, right? Like I think that's where you
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of those feelings about the hospice programs within the corrections facilities. But I think there is a dignity in dying, and I think everybody should be afforded that. So I really love that this program is a thing and that it's out there and happening. And I really appreciate and applaud your efforts in trying to get that into more places. So really
Yeah.
kudos. That's a big thing, and I kind of wonder from a practical standpoint when we're talking about that,
Mm-hmm.
getting something like this off the ground. I mean, obviously there's a lot of coordination, a lot of trust, and a whole lot of education that probably goes into that. What does that process kind of look like when you're initiating those programs?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's going to be a little bit different for every state, but because we knew that, we've actually started a national forum now, a quarterly forum where we invite anybody from correctional facilities from any of the states, as well as any of the hospice associations across the country to join, to participate. Anybody who's an advocate or would like to learn more. And so we tackle a number of different topics just like that. I mean, where do you start, right? I mean, it starts with a conversation with the state and with the correctional facility or corrections department about the need and asking if you can help to kind of discuss that with them and ask questions, ask what's currently being done. But I love how you mentioned, Tina, also about kind of the dignity, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that really goes back to going back to Stephen. I realized when I was listening to his remarks, I didn't want to know what he had done as a 20-something-year-old because it wasn't the man that was standing before me then as a
Right.
40-something-year-old,
Yeah.
right? And I probably would have, I think I commented you, I probably would have slugged the guy in the arm who told me what he had done,
Yeah.
right? Just because I realized that it wasn't the same person.
Right.
We call them correctional facilities, but if we're not going to give people an opportunity to actually correct or to change, we need to call them something else,
Bravo.
right? We call them for what they are, right? We need to call them something else. And, I think, and that's really what, for Stephen, he made the comment also for the warden who began this program. Burl Cain was his name, in Louisiana. But he said, if we can't learn to treat people with dignity in death, how are we ever going to expect people to learn dignity for life? And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, every soul has worth.
That's
That
powerful.
that is very
That's
powerful. It
very
gave me
powerful.
chills.
Same.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that brings me really there's also the emotional side of this. What does it mean, Matt, for people receiving this care, for the volunteers and for the staff who witness this work?
Yeah. From those that I've spoken to, and this is kind of interesting because in Utah and Colorado, we're at different stages of implementation. In Utah, they're still working right now. Well, both states are working on a mechanism for, and that's one of the challenges for the incarcerated individuals to be able to have this personal contact, right? I mean, it's a security issue, it's training, et cetera. So we're building the training for that. We're working with organizations that already have training in place. In those states that have been doing this for some time, though, it means everything. I mean, for these men and women, in some cases where there's programs or enough support to be able to have a women's hospice also, they've just indicated where they're seeing life for the first time, right? That much of their lives have been very self-centered. It's been thinking about self. It's been thinking about survival. The environments that many of these people were, raised in, it's a loop. There's a reason why it's a loop, right? Because they're raised with violence and the things that they see, and they see the way they see people treat each other is self-perpetuating. But with this, they saw humanity for what it really is. They look at people in the eye, they see their soul, they see the vulnerability, they see how fragile human life is to begin with, this mortal shell. And it causes them to ask themselves their own questions, whether it's about spirituality or whether it's about how they want to live the rest of their life. But it causes a lot of, I think, introspective thought, and it elicits change. But I say beyond that is the service. I've always believed that serving people, I mean, that's why we're in the industry that we're in, right? I mean, hospice workers are angels. I mean, home health workers, home care workers. And there's a reason they're attracted to that, to our industry. But service blesses the person who's giving the service as much, if not more, than the person receiving it.
Oh, I love that. And I think, we were just talking about this earlier today about, especially in hospice, it really takes that caring, giving heart. You have to have that in hospice
Mm.
because you're with people at their most vulnerable. And I think one thing that we often say about home care in general between home health and hospice is and acute care, you throw in acute care facilities as well. We are
Mhm.
literally in healthcare, we are with the person from birth until death. We span the
Yeah,
entire lifetime of a human being. And when you think about that, there's something really powerful in that. I think it's what attracts us to it. It's what makes us want to do that. And like you say, having that servant's heart, right? And I think there's something about seeing people at their most vulnerable that really helps you to feel like you're a part of something much bigger. And that's really what hospice and I think home care in general is about, is being a part of the bigger picture. So I appreciate that you put it that way.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I say, I can't say it enough though, but I mean, kudos to you really
Yeah.
for taking on those initiatives. And I think these are the conversations that we need to be having out there. I mean, my husband works in corrections, her husband's in emergency services. And so, you see a lot of the good and the bad in society through those. And I think sometimes, especially when you're working in that field, especially, and I'm sure my husband would definitely agree, you kind of get a little bit numb to it. You're in and out of there so much and you see so much. There is a lot of bad that goes on in prison systems. And I think you kind of become a little bit, well, we had a whole program about becoming numb to trauma because we're just
Yeah,
overloaded with it. And so I think, when we're talking about the prison systems and having those hospice programs in there, like what a wonderful thing to be able to help those people through that final transition, that final journey in their life. I just think it's really wonderful. So I'll step off my soapbox now, but I'm a very the heart hospice is my heart, So I think
yeah,
in general, like when you talk about those programs, it gets me very emotional.
Well, no, and it gives what a beautiful living example of humanity at its
Absolutely.
best.
Yeah.
Quite on.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some very hardened individuals,
Yeah.
Yes.
right, who are in prison, for sure, and years of poor choices and being exposed to different things and et cetera. But when someone's at death's doorstep and ready to transition, you see people differently. You can see that 8-year-old in them, right? You can see that person. My kids and I had a really interesting conversation. I got back from work late yesterday. I had some duties, church-related duties. I came back, and they're watching the Lion King live. And we had an interesting conversation because it's when, it was when Simba and Scar were young. And so I just asked him, I said, so do you think Scar, in becoming what he became, do you think he was a victim of his circumstances and of the example and of what his father taught him was important, etc.? Or do you think he was inherently bad? And they're like, no, look at him. I mean, as a young cub, he wasn't like that at all, right? And so we had a really deep conversation with my teenagers about that and just about remember that with people as well, right? I mean, I truly believe most people are inherently good, good people making bad choices, right? But if we can get back to that good, and oftentimes as we approximate death, we return to be more childlike, and the things that really matter are in the forefront of our minds, right? Not everything else, not the rat race, not the things we got caught up in, but we return kind of that to that child. And I think that's one of the secrets, is trying to see people for who they really are, versus what they've become through the world or what the world has kind of made them.
We definitely live in a world where it tends to seem, I'll say seem, not that it is, but it seems easier to be bad. I think we live in such an easy society to get confused with that these days. So yeah, I do love
Yeah.
that we bring that back to the humanity and kind of seeing the good of
Yeah.
that. So
I don't want to be defined by one decision, whatever that
absolutely
decision is during
same.
my
Yeah.
life. I don't want that one decision to
For
define me.
any of us, absolutely, because I've certainly
Yeah.
made my fair share of rotten. And so, I definitely don't want to be known for that. So I agree.
Yeah.
So now, kind of shifting focus here a little bit to talking a little bit about the second program, because I want to give it some attention
Yeah.
also, is the free caregiver resources that your team actually offers through your association. And, I feel like when we talk about free resources for caregivers, especially, they're not just nice to have. That's not just a nice to have situation. You're actually filling a real gap for those people out there who are caring for loved ones at home, feeling that stress. Often they're doing that without any kind of guidance or any support. So what really led you to create those resources? What has led to that program being initiated?
Yeah. Well, thank you. It really began during COVID. I was brand new director in 2019, so just right before
Oh,
COVID hit,
yeah.
in October of 2019. So several months later, I had no idea what I was stepping into.
Yikes.
And we had so many family members who were calling the association asking for help because they didn't feel comfortable having, a home health worker come into the house. They were worried about exposure and COVID. Everybody was, in the early months, everybody was terrified.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, but I don't know what to do with mom or with dad or with my child, or how do I do this or how do I do that? And we really had the realization that, family caregivers, there just weren't enough resources. So we started doing a lot of research, and we found that there were groups here and there, and there's so many things out there. Every state has things, either through, the AAAs, the ARP, the Alzheimer's Association. There's so many resources, but people don't know where to turn. And we realized that part of the issue is that they don't identify with being a family caregiver.
Yeah.
They're just someone caring for a loved one, right? I mean, and because of that, they don't understand there are hundreds of thousands, really millions. We have 450,000 non-paid family caregivers just in Utah alone.
Wow.
And they didn't realize that, there are other people in the same situation and that there are resources available to them. So we created a family caregiver. We refer to it as a division. Call it an initiative, call it a division, but where we have free sources that are available to family caregivers. But beyond that, we've really tried to create more of a coalition because we know that there's so many other great groups that have seen this need or seen this gap as well.
Right.
And we've been able to bring them together where now we've got grant money behind this. We have over a dozen different community organizations that are working together. We meet regularly. So it's, we're excited about it. There are a lot of projects that have kind of come from this.
It, you've done some amazing work for sure, Matt. And you mentioned COVID and caregivers just being
Mhm.
thrown into things overnight, including yourself, and a whole new situation with COVID and the training needs, the not having a roadmap or knowing what to expect next. Can you walk us through, though, some of the kinds of resources you're offering and how they help people navigate the day to day reality of caregiving?
Sure. No, thank you. We have a landing page on our website that just kind of talks a little bit about family caregivers and about the need. as well as a resources page with some direct links. But we realized that wasn't enough, and not everybody comes through the home health and hospice channel, right? And so through the coalition that we have, we've started a couple different projects. We just completed a series of 12 UCare training videos, so training modules that are anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes long. We'd love to get even a shorter version of them eventually, but we have subject matter experts who talk about different aspects of caregiving, right? About personal care, about transfers, about having advanced directives, finances, making your home environment safe, working with somebody who has dementia. So just a number of different topics that are frequent questions that we receive. And so those modules are available through the website. They're free. We'd love to share them with anybody. And so we've shared them with different organizations as well, who have said that it's just been a real benefit to people who come to them with questions. One of the things we're really excited about now is that we've wanted to create a hub, but we realized we weren't the ones, shouldn't be the ones to do it again, because not everybody channels through or funnels through home health and hospice. So through this group and the coalition that we've helped to build in Utah, the state was actually able to get some grant funding, and they're going to create a hub of caregiver resources where, regardless of what questions somebody has, they can be directed by a discharge planner, a social worker, by a primary care physician, and be directed to this site to be able to find the answers that they need. So that's something else. Our governor has been supportive. We have a state family caregiver day for the last several years that is declared, Family Caregiver Day, just to try to raise awareness around family caregivers and help people know that
Yeah,
they're
and
not
I
alone.
think I want to reiterate too that these resources that you offer are free. And I think that matters
Absolutely.
because so many caregivers are really stretched thin, financially, emotionally, physically, they're just tapped out. And so, I think it's really great that you guys prioritize making those resources available or accessible to those people that are out there doing the caregiving work for without cost, like for free. So really
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
Absolutely free to the family caregivers, but also free to anybody else. So
That's
if there's anybody else you'd love to share with your viewers, we'd love to share any of this information with them.
absolutely.
Definitely. We would love to have those
Mhm.
resources available to anybody who listens. Matt, what are you hearing from some of the caregivers that have been using some of these resources, and how is this changing their experience and confidence in caring for someone that they love?
Yeah, in fact, we've had a lot of family caregivers who've wanted to get involved with our association as volunteers. And we have different, we've had different workshops and things like that, and they've been a large part of that also. But then they're spreading the word, right? Because caregiving is something that you're in and out of, at least family caregiving throughout your life. You may be a family caregiver this year, and then your loved one passes and you're not, but you may be back there again, sometime later in life. Most of us will have that experience to one degree or another, even if it's remote, right? Because I mean, a child may live far away from their parents, but they may be taking care of them in different ways.
Mhm.
And so what we found is that people, number one, are able to identify more with kind of a community, knowing that there's help, that they're not alone. And then they want to give back. They want to help other people because they're like, oh, my girlfriend was talking to me about this and it's been so tough. And I was able to tell them there's a resource available,
Mhm.
there's help available. Right. And so that means a lot. I mean, we're in a staffing crisis as you were in healthcare also. And I think that family members have to be part of that solution. And we need to support them as much as possible as well so that the individuals receiving care receive the care that they deserve and need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good way to look at that too, those resources are really helping people to feel less alone and less overwhelmed and really just more capable when it comes to caregiving. That's kind of the goal, I would imagine, to be able to help them feel a little bit less alone, which is part of the goal of why we do what we do as well. Just
Yeah.
trying to help people feel like there's a stage and there's a voice out there. So I think we all seem to have the same goals in mind. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. Definitely. It also helps them to recognize when additional support is needed, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's important because sometimes people neglect that. I mean, going back to hospice, right? People oftentimes, I mean, the average length of stay is 14 days or less, right?
Right.
Across the country. And many times people are admitted to hospice 24 hours before they
Right.
pass,
Yeah.
right? So for people to realize when there's help, what help's available, and when it's appropriate to ask for different levels of support or in home care, right? In home caregiving and professional help to have somebody come and supplement. It's big.
No, that's fantastic. And so, kind of looking back over what we've discussed in this entirety today, these programs look very different when you put them on paper. We're talking about one being in the correctional
Yeah.
walls, one is supporting the caregivers out in the community, but I feel like they really share something deeper. So from your perspective, Matt, what would you say connects those two programs?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I'd say it goes back to humanity and doing the right thing for the right reason.
Abs-
I mean, for me, that's really what connects them all together. As an association, we've been fortunate to have, just great members and volunteer leaders. Many hands make light work. And we've said, look, we can do what a lot of other associations are doing and just provide an annual conference and a newsletter and, maybe some advocacy up on the Hill. But if we see gaps, we can do more, right? Together we can do a lot. And that would be my message is that together we can see those gaps, we're aware of them, and we can do something about it. And the associations or your state association is a great way to get that done. And or a national association through the National Alliance as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. So, Matt, what did these programs tell you about where our communities are right now and what they need most?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the programs themselves and the fact that we have them and saw a need, it tells me, first of all, that there are gaps. I mean, we all know that in healthcare. We talk about them, we complain about them, right? But it also tells me there are people who are willing to address them. And so that's important as well. That yes, there are needs that exist in the community, but there are also people who are willing to address those needs. We just need to kind of get a motor behind it.
That's great. So, we want to say thank you, Matt, for joining us in the hot seat today.
And we thank you so much for bringing these conversations forward. I think both of these programs remind us that care is truly not a place. It is a responsibility we carry for one another, especially I think in the moments between or those spaces in between that most people never see, specifically when we were talking about the hospice thing. So, definitely really applaud you for all of your efforts there. And thank you so, so much for coming and sitting in the hot seat today.
You're welcome. And likewise, I applaud you for your efforts. Thank you for doing this and helping to bring attention to different things for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Matt. We
Yeah.
appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
And to our listeners, if you're caring for someone, if you're supporting someone, or if you're trying to make sense of a system that feels impossible to navigate, you're not alone. There are resources, there are people who want to help, and conversations like this are how we make sure no one gets left behind.
As always, we thank you for joining us in the Healthcare Hot Seat today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay in the hot seat.